All right, we're going to talk today about the two different Florida contracts, the as-is and
the residential contract.
The regular Florida FAR bar contract.
Yep.
It's really important to know the differences, so please stay tuned in today's video. All right, the as-is. It sounds like it's as-is.
It's not as-is.
Which it is and it isn't. How is it or isn't it?
Well, most sellers think when they hear as-is, that like, well, it's as is. I just don't have to fix anything.
And I can
it's
let
sold.
the house fall apart.
I just let the whole house crumble to the ground. I don't have to fix anything. And they don't get to inspect it. And that's not the case at all. One, you'll notice in the as-is contract, there is an inspection period. The inspection period, also they have, besides the inspection period, they also have in their limits to it, but not as strict of limits and not as in detail of limits as they have in the residential FAR bar contract. So, there's definitely, understanding the differences between two contracts is critically important.
It is, and one contract might fit a certain client or a certain house,
sure,
and the other might not.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
But the main thing too, well, there's a lot of main things. One of the things, you still have to, as a seller, maintain the property. There's a section under property maintenance on each contract that the seller still has the obligation to maintain the property as you had last seen it or upon execution of the contract.
Agreed.
They can't just let it go to hell in a handbasket.
Right. You can't.
As is.
Yeah. Just because it's an as-is contract doesn't mean if a roof leak pops up, you can just ignore it because the house is as is. That's
right.
Not what it means at all.
Right.
Also, I think that it's important that, as the market is moving in different ways, you'll notice like when everything was gangbusters and everything was selling really quickly and these sky-high prices, everybody was using as-is contracts because at the end of the day, if you went to a residential contract, there generally tends to be a little bit more protection for the buyers. And if they weren't willing to give up those protections, sellers were saying, well, forget it then. I'll go with the people who are on an as-is contract. So,
right.
Understanding the two differences between the contract is critically important, not just for the buyer in the house, but also understanding the market as well. If you're in a declining market, sellers may say, I want this contract versus that one. And so I think it's super important.
Depends on the marketplace as well. And like I said, so the as-is doesn't always mean as is. So in the case of an inspection, which 99.9% of buyers are going to have an inspection. Although yesterday, oddly enough, I had one that didn't have it. They had 0-day inspection, which is really, really uncommon.
Right.
But most people will. And most people, I would say, I don't know, maybe 75 to 80%. If they find something that the seller was unaware of or not disclosed to their knowledge that comes up during an inspection, like maybe a pool leak or a little roof leak, maybe it was active prior that they didn't know about, or an active leak or things like that, or maybe there's some termite damage prior, or whatever the case is, buyers will tend to still ask for either a credit or repairs, or repairs done by closing, even though it's as is. And generally over the years that I've dealt with both of the contracts, generally we can work something out.
Sure.
And it's mutually agreeable to the parties.
Well, and this is something that happens, I think, more than people think. I mean, most people think that, well, I put it under contract, we close, and that's sort of the end of it. Generally speaking, I mean, things happen. I mean, I've had one recently where there's an issue with the roof. I've had different ones. So things happen, and at the end of the
Absolutely
day,
does.
I think what's really critically important to keep the deal together is that everybody on both sides is reasonable. If you keep everybody, the buyers and sellers, reasonable, then generally speaking, you can work through the issues and get the deal done.
The other thing with the as-is too, technically during their inspection period, they could really back out. The buyer can really back out for really any reason. They could see a hole in the wall and be like, oh, I didn't see that before.
They can just change their mind.
And it really affects the escrow deposit. So they're not in default. They are entitled to that escrow deposit.
Correct.
Really for any reason during that inspection period. Typically we negotiate 7 to 10 days. Both contracts just default to 15 days, which in this market is kind of long. What do you think about 15 days?
It's pretty long. I mean, and generally speaking, you do see it cut down. And if you don't see that 15 days period cut down a little bit, it really raises questions like, well, wait a second, why do you need 2 weeks? Or over 2 weeks.
To drag their feet or whatever.
It raises the question, are you guys looking for a free look? And what a free look means is, you're looking for 15 days to do a bunch of inspections and then come back and try to renegotiate the entire deal. And that's, obviously sellers don't want to see that. So we generally want to see that cut down a bit. And look, at the end of the day, buyers and sellers want to know that once they go under contract, they have a deal at that price and under those terms. So
yeah, and we don't technically work with a lot of investor types. We work primarily with end users, people either primary residents or snowbird. Maybe they'll rent, some don't. Actually, a lot of them don't. Some do, though. We definitely work with those types, but mostly end users who aren't looking to flip, fix, flip, and make a quick buck on these type of properties. Switching over to the regular FAR bar contract, you still have the general inspection period. Now, if you don't mark up the contract, what it reads as up to 1.5% of the purchase price toward general repairs, up to the same for termite, and up to the same for any open permits liens. So on $1 million property, that would expose the seller to quite a bit of
$45,000 total
potential credits or repairs. So over the last few years, especially, sellers are like, nope, $0 or $100 or whatever, just to show good faith. Now we're seeing flexibility on that. What are you seeing?
Yeah, a little bit more flexibility. I mean, generally speaking, again, it's sort of like if you don't cut down the inspection period on an as-is contract. If you just leave those blank, everybody's going to start asking questions. Well, wait a second here. Are you guys looking for 45 grand in credits because there might be termites, or there might be this, or there might be that? So generally speaking, everybody's going to want to see those numbers kind of collapse down a little bit.
And buyers over the years, again, not as much in the last few years of the market, but buyers, when the sellers do cap out those limits, they sometimes say, well, why are they doing that? What's wrong? Do they know something that we don't? Are they trying to cover something up? Okay, technically we also have a seller's disclosure. And if the seller is aware of anything, if they are aware, they will be on the hook if they knew about something and did not disclose it. And if it does come up during inspection, what happens? Like if this buyer backs out and you had an inspection finding issues with the property, you have to do what?
You have to disclose it. You have to disclose it.
You have to address it either way as a seller.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
you can't just brush it under the rug. And as a realtor, we have fiduciary duties. Like if I know of something, it is my obligation to disclose that. I don't care what the seller says. We have to. We have a fiduciary
100%.
responsibility.
And I think just even ethically, like if you know that there's something wrong with the property, you should be disclosing it, period. And
better safe to disclose or over disclose than under disclose, and have that come back and bite you, and have a buyer maybe come sue your client.
Well, or you. I mean, at the end of the day, that's where generally you see agents getting sued. I mean, it's because they knew something was wrong with the property. The client, the seller, knew something was wrong with the property.
Not worth it.
Neither of them disclosed it, and on the back end of it, everybody finds out that there's an issue. And so, that's a really good way to end up in court. And at the end of the day, what you're saving, or the deal you're trying to put together, isn't worth the legal fees and all the headaches that you're going to cause on the back end. So.
Yeah. I will say during the crazed market out on Longboat in particular, a lot of sellers were not accepting the as-is contract, and probably still don't, but I think that's softened up a little bit. But the reason being is they didn't want people coming and going, pending, active, because it's such a fluid market. So we're seeing some of that relax a little bit. I, as a good agent, I like to always have a conversation with the listing agent if I'm on the buyer side. Ask them what their seller prefers. Like, are there offers? Like, you want to get a feel for the deal. The communication. Like, you don't want to just send an offer without talking to the agent. I think that's just the most. I don't know. I think that's a mistake a rookie would make.
It's just laziness.
It is.
Like, at the end of the day, you're just
a lot lazy.
Like the easier thing or the better thing to do for the deal is to reach out to the listing agent and say, what are they looking for? What terms are they looking for? Do they care if we close early? Do they care if we close late?
It's important.
And some people will say, look, it's more important that they close early. The price is not as important to them as it is closing early because they have another house they want to buy. So, you can get a lot of information just by having that quick conversation.
Yeah, or maybe they need a lease back. Maybe they don't have a place to go. There's a multitude of reasons, of course, why you want to make that extra step, and secure the property for your client. And what better way to do that is to keep the communication lines open, and let me ask you this. So as it relates to the as-is versus the regular contract, what would be a good example of a seller that might be like, no, the as-is is really, really what I would prefer, actually, even though they have a 7 to 10 or whatever inspection day free look?
I mean, if they're looking to just sort of have a clean, easy deal that's a little bit smoother and a little, there aren't all these potential, you have all these different categories of repairs.
Maybe, yeah.
They may just write in a one-line addendum, repairs limited to $1,000 on an as-is contract and call it a day.
Right.
The residential, you really have to kind of read through it and pay attention to every single line that's in there, because if you're missing one of those repair sections and you don't put the right amount or whatever, I mean, it can drastically affect the deal.
Yeah.
So
I think an as-is great. If it's an older home, I think a nice way around that if I'm representing the seller is to offer a home warranty.
Yeah.
I know over the years we don't really work with a ton of warranties, but I think in the case of a home that is older that might have some potential things that arise during an inspection,
Sure.
I think that's a good solution to it. Otherwise, you're looking at big potential credits to the buyer.
Right.
We usually end up working through it. We don't have a lot of contracts fall through. Knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
So
I've only really had one, but it was over a repair issue on a roof. I mean, it was a roof leak. We were coming in 2 days before closing, and for the walkthrough, and there was a roof leak, and go to repair the roof leak, set a new closing date. The new closing date ended up being the day the hurricane hit. Another roof leak, and then eventually the deal ended up falling apart. And
but you were there, you caught it.
We did.
Your buyer, so your buyer would have been none the wiser.
Well, and the seller was very honest. I mean, he met me there for the inspection, said, "Hey, look, I've been away for the weekend. I came in, and this is here." So he pointed it out, but unfortunately, it came to a point where the buyer wanted an entire new roof. They couldn't agree on the final deal. So.
But knowing the contracts are really, really important, both when you're representing a seller and for a buyer. To me, it's good to go over the contracts with your sellers in advance if there's time allowable for that, and if the seller is interested in that. Sometimes they don't care either way. Many times they do. And so, you want to get with an agent that's really well averse to the changes or upcoming changes to both contracts.
Right. We
have great attorneys. We don't act as attorneys. We have attorneys for that, unless, my pay rate might go up a little, law school, then my pay rate would go up. But so we do have a great team behind us to cover that. And there's a motorcycle. Anyway, so that's that.
That's it. I think that's it. Yeah.
There's so much more we could talk about on it, but that's the gist of it. And right now we are looking for
what?
Sellers.
Listings. We're looking for listings right now.
I just went through a buyer list, by the way. I'm just calling a bunch of buyers because we do have a new listing coming up that I'll tell you about soon. You'll see a video coming soon to my YouTube channel. But the first thing we do is call all of our buyers. So we have a long list of buyers. We just need some inventory right now. So we're happy to provide you with an equity update on your property, whether it's in Manatee, Sarasota, or Charlotte County. We have a team. We've got a great team right now, the STAR team, STAR.
Yep.
So please reach out to us. My cell is 941-544-7690, or click shaylatwit.com.
And Andrew Reese, my cell phone number is 941-586-2460.
Thank you.
Thank you.